Okay, hello everyone. For the judge test, I will start by answering the true or false questions. Number one, in this house would do X motions, teams don't have to bring practical arguments in their cases to fulfill their burden. The answer to this is true. Teams are not always obliged to bring practical arguments to fulfill their burden. If they want to bring principal argument in their case to fulfill their burden, it's still a valid approach. So basically, principle and practical arguments are both equally powerful depending on the strength of logics given. So let's say that a team don't bring practical arguments, but if they feel like they want to bring principal argument and they can and they feel like it's the most important thing in the debate to fulfill their burden, it's also okay. It's valid at the end of the day. But essentially, as a judge, we should not put expectations on which type of arguments can fulfill a team's burden, which types of argument is better than the other. It's wrong to have a belief that, oh, principal argument is always better than practical or vice versa. So basically, yeah, I think that even if to some extent the debater don't bring practical arguments, if they feel like they want to use principal argument to fulfill their burden, it's still okay at the end. So the answer is true. Number two, in structural sense, debaters are allowed to provide rebuttals at the end of their speech. This is also true because there is no restriction as to how debaters how they should structure their speech. Because at the end, everyone has their own style or preference in developing their structure. So if they feel like, oh, the rebuttals can go at the end of the speech, or like, yeah, whenever they want to put it, as long as the framing is clear that it is going to be utilized as a response, then it's still okay at the end of the day. What counts most is still the relevance and the elaboration of their ideas. So true. Number three, POI should be valued the same as argumentative and responsive material in the debate. This is also true. POIs are just as powerful as arguments or responses. Even at times, they could be utilized to clarify certain setups in opening debate. POIs can be used to criticize or clarify certain flaws from the opponents, emphasizing strong points from your team, etc. So yeah, POI is just as strong and powerful as arguments or responses. But please note that the quality of the POI still need to be measured, just as how we assess the quality of arguments. Because uh, this, just as how we assess arguments, we may think that, oh, yes, they bring argument, but it's not always strong. The same thing goes to POI. We should also consider or like assess the strength of that POI. I think that POI is also important because on the manual we have explained that we will also adjust the system in NOVED as NUDC or like WUDC. So POI will also be important to break certain tipping points. So to break certain deadlocks of two teams, for example. So if there is no tipping point for example, between two teams, if it's a deadlock, POI can be uh, the last resort, or like it could be like a consideration to put a certain team higher compared to the other. So yeah, the answer is true. Number four, as an as an average reasonable voter, a judge should not favorably credit teams that provide the most extensive facts in their arguments. The answer to this is also true. Extensive facts are only beneficial when they are equipped with logics or link backs to the motion. While facts could bring nuance or persuasiveness of a certain case, but the step-by-step logics behind should be of importance. So, as a judge, um, just because a certain team throw a lot of facts, they bring a lot of matters, but not necessarily like give certain analysis, then I think, yeah, I think that we should not favorably credit the teams just because they bring a lot of facts, just because it seems like they're smart, but we should also scrutinize the logics behind that. But I think that there has to be several points to note. We need to be careful first. Sometimes debater throw facts, but the analysis is implicit. So yeah, although they bring a lot of facts, a lot of matters, but we also, as a judge, need to scrutinize. Maybe there are like some kind of analysis behind those facts which are implicit, which we should also consider. But I think that, yeah, we need to be more careful on that. But also, sometimes team also, maybe they they give us a wrong fact, or like the fact is wrong, but like they bring strong or solid logical analysis behind that. On that regard, I think that we need to also be careful, because we should not discredit that particular speaker or like that particular team. Maybe the fact is wrong, but we need to still assess their logics or the argumentations behind that accordingly. So yeah, at the end, the answer to this is true. Number five, in the deliberation process, chairs should exclude trainees in casting the vote for the final results of the debate. This is also true. This has been explained in the manual. Voting should only be done by chairs and panels, but only as last resort when the judges don't reach a consensus. So obviously, uh, chairs and panels will have to confer first to decide the rankings. But at the end of the day, if they don't reach a consensus or a certain agreement, then yeah, voting should be the last resort. If the shall the voting be conducted, eventually chair will have two votes if the total amount of the judge in that chamber is even. So if the total amount of the judge is two or like four or like six, there are six there are six judges comprising the chair and the panels. Then to break the deadlock, to make it odd, chair needs to have two votes. Yeah, I guess that's it for number five. The answer is true. Number six, all judges, whether they are chairs, panels, or trainees, need to do their oral adjudications or OA in front of the debaters. False. OA should only be done by the chair, because the chair already represents the voice of the panels or the trainees as per the conferring process. So, yeah, the panels have given their inputs or like the comparisons during the conferring process, and that's the duty of the chair to represent and like to capture all the discussion, the all the result of the discussion from the conferring process, and yeah, deliver that result of the conferring process to the debaters. That's the duty of the chair. So forth. Number seven, debater's style of speech should be highly considered when assessing the persuasiveness of their speech. This is also false, because style of speech is sometimes relative, because like everyone has different style of speech, maybe given their different backgrounds of where they come from, or like yeah, birth lottery or something like that. So although their style of speech maybe to some extent might, I don't know, might make us more attracted to some extent. Maybe their mannerism is much more clear and more acceptable, but it doesn't mean that it should be of high consideration, as the judge should we should prioritize more on assessing the logics or the analysis they provide. So irrespective of their race or gender or their identity, maybe like they have a different style of speech, also like because maybe like their tone, their logat, maybe maybe it's kind of For some of us, maybe it takes more efforts to try to understand the ideas behind that. But at the end, it's the job of the judge to be more thorough and comprehensive, irrespective of their mannerism. We need to put, as a judge, we also need to put more efforts to listen to the analysis provided by the debaters. So, yeah, in the end, the answer is false. Number eight. Number eight. Judges can and should penalize a speaker's points for disrespecting their opponent's gender pronouns in their speech. This is also false because um, disrespecting other person or like equity violations are not grounds to penalize speaker points. If a speaker feels offended, if you feel like your gender identity or like other type of identity is being attacked during the debate, you could report and try to seek for reconciliation on to the equity officers. It's okay to file the report, but as a judge, we still need to be as neutral as possible, irrespective of what is going on the debate. Maybe we can give reminder during the debate if it goes too far, but at the end, for the decision making on us deciding the rank, we need to be neutral and still assess the debate as per it is. So the answer for this is false. Number 9, deputy speeches ought to bring completely new arguments to the table. This is also false because deputies are not always obliged to bring completely new ideas in their speech. Maybe like a certain framings or further elaboration or more mechanization or other attempts to glorify your first analysis or your first speaker's case could be just as powerful. So, yeah, deputy speeches don't always have to completely bring new arguments. Sometimes different line of analysis to add or to substantiate or to equip certain premise from the first speaker is also a valid approach for deputies to bring at the end. In the end, irrespective of the argument is new or like it's just more elaboration from the first speaker, at the end, as a judge, what we need to do is still assess their logics, the strength of logics, whether it's whether it's strong or not. Because sometimes, like maybe the argument is not new, but they bring some kind of likelihood or mechanization, which makes the case of the first speaker much more solid. I think that's still a valid approach for deputies. That's for number 9. False. Number 10. Should opening government provide the wrong definition of the motion, member opposition cannot do a definitional challenge in their speech. This is true because this has been written on the manual. It's the prerogative of the opening to set up the debate. And if it's true that opening government really failed to set up the motion or like the definition is really that wrong, as member of opposition, you could have had the chance to clarify the definition from the POI. You could like try to push like or like to give to ask POI to the opening government to clarify. So I think that that's not so eventually SMO it is discouraged to like suddenly redefine everything, especially when all the other benches agree and follow that particular definition to begin with. I think that the suggestion that I could give for MO, if it is true that the other teams might, they might run their case to the wrong definition, instead of challenging the definition, I think that MO or like closing opposition, you could engage to the wrong definition. You could try to still if using that particular wrong definition, you could try to prove why the analysis from the opponent is wrong, for example. But I think that you can also you can also like bring scenarios or like alternatives. So in the scenario when the motion is wrong, like why the opponent's case is still untrue, for example. But in the scenario, for example, when the motion, the definition is right, what is going to happen? Or yeah, but essentially, uh, you can you still need to engage to that particular motion, but it's but if you want to like uh, give scenarios, like the scenario in which when the motion is wrong, what is going to happen, the scenario when the motion is right, what is going to happen. I think that it's still permissible if you want to do that, but at the end it's just discouraged to like literally like just challenging the definition. But I think that you should also need to engage to that particular wrong definition, assuming that the definition of the motion is that wrong. Like, yeah, you need to also engage to the case brought by the opponent on that term. So but if you want to extend the debate, I think that it's still okay at the end, but still need to engage to the flow of the debate. Yeah, I guess that's clear. So the answer is true. So thank you everyone. That's all for the true or false question.
Hi everyone, this is Shantik. I'll be representing the Adjudication 4 of NOVED 2021 to go through the short essay answers from the judge test. Starting with the first question, we have the motion, this House will translate wet foot, dry foot policy. There's also context slide in that. The scenario was opening government defining reinstatement should target all refugees instead of Cuban refugees only. Meanwhile, closing government goes on with OG definition and did not clarify at all. Now, the expectation from this question was when you decide the ranking, both OG and CG should be penalized accordingly because they neglect to set up a proper definition. When they defines that the reinstatement should target all refugees, most likely what happened in the debate was the discussion will be talking about any other countries and not focusing with Cuban, and probably will also there's a lot of talk in regards to whether it's a right definition or not. Thus, OG should be penalized because exactly the definitions skew away the debate from the crux of the discussion, and CG for not clarifying. Knowing that it's explicitly mentioned and quite intuitive from the context slide, not clarifying and reframe the debate, or at least pointing out that the debate should take place and focus on US and Cuban relationship is the basis why we also should punish closing government. Now goes on with the second question. In the second question, we talk about the motion. This House will actively promote esports as a viable career choice. OG argued that it's a lucrative career choice where you can get profits and it's very sustainable. Meanwhile, CG bring a new characterization that it is not profitable, not sustainable. So how do you assess OG and CG and whether it was a contradiction? First of all, CG claim is acceptable. It illustrates the worst case scenario where esports might not be always profitable, which most likely going to be the argument of the opposition. It can be considered as a concession or response towards the opposition. However, this can be considered as contradiction or kniving if it is explicitly pointed out by the opposition, considering that it is inconsistent with what their opening characterized on the very first place. Next question, we talk about the POIs. So basically, OG is not offered POI, and CG accept POI, but only from their closing instead of their cross batch. So assuming both OG and CG position are tight, how would you place CG, OG, and CG? So a quick refreshment on POI policy that we adopted from NUDC and WUDC. So teams should at least take one speech, and the fact that they're not taking a POI can affect the outcome, include but not limited to lowering the speaker score, flipping a close call, and reducing the margin of the victory. Referring to this policy, OG should not penalized because it's not within their power that the opposition do not give POI, while CG do not engage with OO. If we talk about flipping the call, shall there be no delta or significant tipping point between these two bench, OG should be above CG. The fourth question we talk about in times of global pandemic, this House would ban patent on vaccines. The scenario was OG talked about the accessibility where patent is banned. Therefore, countries or companies that lack of resources can access and tap in to the vaccines more easier. Meanwhile, opening opposition argues that it will disincentivize research and development. So in terms of assessing OG and OO case, we have to concede that it is a deadlock, knowing that it's established that OO and OG and OO are symmetrical, and both of these cases are not engaging to one another, then other contribution and framework should be taken into consideration on deciding the rankings. But solely on this scenario and example, we should not put OG or OO above one another. Now, the last question. In a type room you chair, you have two panels and 3 trainees with various rankings as shown below. So the point of this question was to see whether the way you want to conduct the deliberation, whether it was an effective one or not. So all scenarios, all answer is acceptable to some extent as long as it was effective. So what you can do in order to do that is that first identify comparison to be discussed. The example will be discussing about OG first, give opportunity for panel 1 to defend OG contribution, and chair and panel 2 can express the tipping point why then OG should be fourth and fell over OO and CO. And if the consensus reached that OG is fourth, then the ranking will be as follow, right? CG, OO, CO for chair and panel 1, and then OO, CG, CO for panel 2. Then the next discussion will be about CG and OO, where to place them. Other scenarios are also acceptable as long as you point out which comparison should be made. Secondly, that you can also do, highly encouraged, but it's not mandatory when you encounter such scenarios, is that you can prioritize your trainee and discuss with them after the rounds. You can give them opportunities to express opinions for specific questions or concerns during the deliberation, but respectfully cut them short if they're spending too much time, like they're dozing off from the topic or going in circle on points you already understand. So also, if the time runs out and the ranking that not meet consensus should be determined by votes. After that, don't forget scoring, ballots, etc. So again, just to remind you, all scenarios are acceptable as long as you can illustrate how effective the deliberation will be, knowing that there's a lot of people, there are a lot of panels and trainees in the room. Does that conclude the answer for short essay answer? Shall be there any question in regards to this? Feel free to approach the CAP. Thank you and good luck in judging of 2021.